Here is the setup for doing a cutoff for the lengths of your stiles and rails. You notice here that we're using the zero clearance insert and also the miter gauge extension that's reversible and also has an adjustable stop. Both those items were made in lesson 10 of your self-study course. They come in really handy for this type of work where you want to do cutoffs to repeatable length for each piece being identical and have no tear out on the bottom side or the back side. Having all of our stock planed and cut to 2 1/4 inches wide, we're now going to cut the pieces to length. Now here's a drawing of the layout for the shaker frame that we're going to be doing here. Our stiles are 18 inches high because that'll be the height of the frame. The rails are 7 1/2 inches long. That plus the 2 1/4 inch width of each of the stiles gives us a 12-inch width for our end frame. So we have to add an inch to the length of those rails for the tongues on each end. We add an inch because there'll be a 1/2 inch on each end for the tongues. 1/2 inch deep will also be the depth of the grooves that go all the way around. And of course, those will be a 1/4 inch wide. And that's what we'll set our stacked dado set for. Here we are set up to do our cross cuts for each of our pieces for our stiles and our rails. As you can see, we're using the 60-tooth crosscut blade with the zero clearance insert. That keeps any tear out from happening on the bottom side of our stock when we cut it. Then on the fence, we're using the reversible miter gauge extension with the sliding stop, and we've got that set so that the extension goes on both sides of the blade. That will keep any tear up happening from the back side of our stock when we cut. Here we've got it set for 8 1/2 inches long for our rails. And our stock will go in right like this. And we'll cut off each piece now, and you can watch me do that. After I do that, I will reset it for the 18 inches for the stiles, and we'll cut those. Now I'm going to reset this for the stile. I already have some cut to length, so I can just match what this one is. So I'll just put this right against the tooth on the blade, put this stop right up to it, and there I am. I'm set. So here you can see how perfectly clean. There's no tear out anywhere when you cut them off this way. On the inside edges of all of these stiles and rails, we're going to cut a groove. It's going to be a 1/2 inch deep, a 1/4 inch wide, exactly centered on the stock. Now I've run through a test piece to do my setup, and this is the test piece here. I could show you here. Right there. This is the test piece that I've done. You can see that slot is exactly centered on the center of the stock. And this is the test piece I used, and it's exactly a 1/2 inch in depth. Now here's the table setup for cutting it. You can see we've got the rip fence on here, and I've spaced the edge of that stacked dado exactly a 1/4 inch away from the fence. And I used this spacer, 1/4 inch spacer here, to set my spacing there, exactly that spacing away from the fence. And I've got exactly a 1/2 inch deep. So the way you could tell if your stock is exactly centered is when you're done, you should be able to take your piece of stock and you should be able to run that through, and then you should be able to flip it and also run it through with no binding whatsoever. When you can do that, you know you've got that slot exactly centered on the stock. Now we're doing the setup for doing the tongues on the rails. And when we're done, these will fit exactly in here like this. So to set up for that, we need the length of this tenon to be exactly identical to the depth of this groove. And we need the thickness of these tenons to be exactly the thickness of this groove. So we know that this is a 1/2 inch deep, but to make sure that I get them identical, I take my square here, we set it this for the bottom depth on here, and we're going to transfer that over to our setup over here. So you can see I'm using the L fence. I've got the stacked dado here. I've got it set for 3/4 inch thickness on the stacked dado. Now, I want the distance from the outside of these teeth to the L fence to be exactly that distance. So I can use this for my setup when I do it, so that when this is exactly against the outside teeth, then this should be exactly touching there, and it is. So that's how I set my distance from the outside of the teeth to the L fence. Then for the depth, I want the depth of this to be such that when I'm done, I get tenons are going to fit here exactly. Now, my first test one here that I did with this one, I cut too much off, so it was too loose in there. So that didn't work. So I needed to when that happened, I needed to raise my table up so I wasn't taking so much off. And so on this one here, this one will go in, but it's pretty tight. Need to be loosened up a little bit. So the way to fine tune that is using the adjustable stop collar on your table, like I have down here. And you can dial those in as 1/1000th of an inch increments at a time. So that's what I did to get my final thickness. And that's on this one here. That fits in exactly right there. And you can see it goes exactly to the bottom of there, and it's flush against the edges here. So that's exactly what I want for a final result. This one here, the other end, when I did that one, you could see I've got a gap here, this line here. That's because this tenon is too long. So I had to shorten up the length, the distance, just a hair. I had to shorten the distance here just a hair to get that to fit. And when I made that adjustment, then I got it to fit exactly like you see right there. So now when we feed those through, of course we use the miter gauge like you see here. And to keep tear out from happening on the back side, I like to use a piece of hardboard. I just put some double stick tape on here and then butt that against the L fence, double stick that right onto the miter gauge. So that will keep tear out from happening on the back side of my stock. All right, so now I'm going to have you watch me cut each end of these two rails. And we'll take a pause here. Okay, these spacers here, I wanted to talk about what I use these for. First of all, since this is about 1/4 inch in depth here for my depth of cut on the stacked dado, I set my L fence just to be slightly above that. So I've got a 5/16 spacer here, which makes sure that each end of the fence is 5/16 above, so it's above the dado, stacked dado there. That's what I use that for. This 1/4 inch, I use that for setting my initial height, and I use this 1/2 inch here for just setting my initial distance away from here. And then I fine tune it after I've done that initial setting using the adjustable stop collar for my height, and also just doing some test cuts to adjust for where my fence position needs to be. All right. So I'm going to come around the other side and we're going to cut these two rails. And of course, here's my hardboard, which will keep tear out from happening on the back side. And we'll go ahead and cut these. Okay, now, having cut them, you can see that it fits together, just like this. So the last step then will be to cut our panel, which will go in the middle here and glue this up.